ist dem Feind gelungen, die Front in breiter Formation zu durchbrechen. Im Süden hat der Gegner Zossen genommen und stößt auf Stahnsdorf vor. Der Feind operiert jetzt am nördlichen Stadtrand zwischen Frohnau und Pankow und im Osten ist der Feind bis zur Linie Lichtenberg-Marsdorf-Karlshorst gelangt.
Mit dem Angriff Steiners wird das alles in Ordnung kommen.
Mein Führer, Steiner konnte nicht genügend Kräfte für einen Angriff massieren. Der Angriff Steiner ist nicht erfolgt.
Es bleiben im Raum Keitel, Jodl, Krebs und Burgdorf. Das war ein Befehl! Der Angriff Steiners war ein Befehl! Wer schickt Sie?
Dass Sie es wagen, sich meinen Befehl zu widersetzen! So weit ist das also gekommen. Das Militär hat es belogen!
Welcome into another Key of David podcast. I am joined by David the Lion Douglas. And I've had people ask me, why do you call him David the Lion Douglas? And that's because it was his birthday yesterday, July 23rd. He is a young Leo. So he's a Leo and his middle name is Leon. So that's why he gets the title David the Lion Douglas. And Trevor Keys, I don't have a great nickname for Trevor other than I love the nickname TK for Trevor Keys.
TKO
Money is also really good because this dude is good at making money. But we also are joined by Lance Weaver. And as you know, we've done 2 episodes on what is called the Continental Model, which is a model of the Book of Mormon geography. So we're joined again back with Lance to re-engage the discussion and further discover the model called the Continental Model. Lance, welcome to the show again.
How's it going? Excited to be here as always. It's always fun.
Let's jump into it. Let's get going. I know we got a little slide presentation. Let's pick up where the last one left off. And listen, if you haven't seen the first 2 videos, go look for Lance's beautiful picture. And listen, this time he even did his hair for us. He's not wearing a hat today. So for all of these who are online, like, hey, he must be bald. He's not bald. He's got hair.
This is like against my religion, though, man. You guys are never going to see my hair again. It's way too much work.
But let's, if you haven't watched the first 2, watch the first 2. So go back and watch those so you can understand what's going on here in our 3rd episode with Lance on the Continental Model. Lance, take it away.
And hey, I think appropriate. Start off just a little bit, even though people need to go back and watch the other one. Start off with just a little top down of what is the Continental Model and what we're jumping into here.
All right, awesome. Yeah, I think I'm going to call Trevor T-Dog.
T-Dog. There we go.
No, that doesn't look at his hat. That's his nickname right there. All right, we're going to go through this and hopefully have some fun. I am like, the people need to go through the old ones, but I'm seriously just going to kind of jump through things because every time I talk about this thing, like I have so many hours worth of material, like hours and hours and hours of material. I could just like keep going and we could drill down at every little site, right? Because I have correlations for every site and like every little particular of the Book of Mormon. And 20 hours later, everyone's eyes would be glossed over and they'd be drooling out the side of their mouth as they're sleeping on their desk. And anyway, I have trouble staying on track. I got to get, Shane, you got to keep me on track here as I go through this. But we're just going to jump through and I'm going to try and hit a bunch of the main points. And then we're going to get a bunch of comments of people who watch 10 minutes of it and are like, no, I don't agree. That can't be real. It's like, look, guys, please just like hold your judgment until you at least see like 2 hours of material. Like, can I just ask for 2 hours before you like really make judgment?
I've noticed that on the comments, people on the comments, like you can tell they didn't even watch the video and they're like, well, have you heard about the city of Limhi? And you're like 20-minute answer. Yeah.
I've been trying to be like really like lengthy in the comments and answer everybody's comments, even if they're kind of silly. Just 'cause I think it helps the algorithm. Um, but yeah, guys, come on, please just like watch a little bit more before you jump on like some, oh no, I can't be. All right, and that actually just makes me remember the main comments that we're gonna get, and I don't even have a slide on it. All right, let's go in here anyway though. Okay, so the continental model, right? This is like a model that I've been working on for 20 years. It's awesome. It's amazing. And I'm not biased at all, but you got to check it out. My whole premise, right, is that the church is split right now between the Heartlanders, who believe the whole Book of Mormon happened in the eastern United States, mostly northeastern United States, and the Mesoamericanists, right? I call it the Mayaland models because they actually like don't really even include all of Mesoamerica in their model. It's mainly just the Mayan lands, which is like south of Chiapas and Tehuantepec. So we've got these Mesoamerican and Heartland models, and they both got so many amazing points, right? There's a lot of adherents, a lot of people who are sold to each of those models, and for good reason, because they both, in my opinion, have really good points and really good parts of the truth. But my whole point is Joseph Smith taught a continental model. Why not believe in a continental model when you've got the Book of Mormon, I think, strongly suggesting a continental model. You've got Joseph Smith strongly suggesting a continental model. You got the church split between a continental model, essentially, you know, half down south, half up north. If there's a way to make all of the evidence fit into the narrative, like, why not pay some attention to that, you know, and pray about it. Hey, you know, this is all spiritual too. So let's dive in though. Okay, I'm going to start. Like I said, people need to go back to our old videos and kind of watch that, get some background. So since I've already in previous models covered all of Joseph Smith's quotes and how he definitely, you know, the reason why they both use Joseph Smith is because Joseph Smith really pushes Heartland things, and he definitely pushes Mesoamerican things, and he pushes Southwest things, according to firsthand witnesses of what he said. So we already talked about that. You know, we already talked about the internal model and some of the really important things about the internal model, especially like the West Sea and that new border that Moroni built, and then creates the wars that end up filling the war chapters of Alma. So, but we're going to jump right now into what we haven't covered at all, and then we'll kind of reiterate some of that we have later. So you're missing some foundational groundwork if you're just watching from here without, you know, watching those other shows. But we didn't talk at all and anything else about the Jaredites, and so I'm gonna hop right in and give some really awesome insights that have come to me, you know, through these kind of wild dream experiences about the Jaredites, and I'm going to give a couple different timelines even that make the Jaredite model like completely mesh with science. Okay, with, I should say, with the predominant accepted archaeological views of North America. Okay, so elephants. Okay, let's talk about elephants. The Book of Mormon narrative starts with the brother of Jared at the Tower of Babel, right? And it comes over, he goes across some big sea, doesn't say what it is, like whether it's the Mediterranean or whether it's the Black Sea and the Caspian, and he's heading over to China. We just have to guess. And then they camp for a couple of years, and then they build the boats that are able to be submerged beneath the waves. And then he comes across the waves with no sails, just with the current. And it says, right, that they came here to North America, and it gives a couple. I have a timeline here. Let me just show it here. Let's see.
And the Jaredites are the first ones that we're aware of that left, I guess, the Jerusalem or the Tower of Babel area and set sail. What we don't know is, were there other people that did that as well? That's all we have a record of.
Yeah. And early church members, or church leaders, they totally thought like the Jaredites and the Nephites, like all the Native Americans were descendants of them. But I think we should get digging into the Book of Mormon further, especially when you like read about Jacob, and we're only like 40, 50 years into them getting here, and suddenly he's talking about his people like it's a huge number of people, you know, and then you start seeing little clues that's like, oh, I think there probably were. I think the book actually does have allowance for the fact that they are coming to an already inhabited land, you know, and then you're like, oh yeah, well, it's like, it's obvious because the Jaredites are there, even though Nephi never mentions anything. So he's purposely not saying anything about these past people, even though it's obvious from the narrative that there are existing people. And so maybe that's
Right.
the case with the Jaredites, but okay, maybe not. That's what I want to hit here. Okay, so one thing that is kind of interesting when we look, I look at a timeline here of every Jaredite person in the Jaredite record, right? And I have them even correlated with all the biblical timelines, right? And you can kind of put them side by side. So one like kind of predominant thought is it's like, well, the Tower of Babel happened around the time of Abraham, according to the Bible, right?
Right.
And it's kind of interesting, even as we look at the dates, there's not a whole lot of dates given. Like we have no idea when the Tower of Babel was, according to the Book of Mormon. We have no idea of even ages of most people, except for a couple select ones. Like for instance, Coriantumr is the first age that we get, and it says the guy lived to be 142, right? I mean, most people would be like, well, that's impossible. But if you look at the biblical timeline, it has Moses living at like 220, right? Like super old. And I think Abraham, if I remember right, ends up living to be about 140 or something like that, given the biblical timeline. So it's kind of interesting that the age range is kind of matching Abraham. But this is what I want to suggest, right? Okay, so animals in the Book of Mormon are a huge thing. I have a whole article on it that talks about all the different possible animals, right? Like, I think it's ridiculous to call a tapir a horse, right? But it certainly could be a pig or a cow or something like that, right? And if you look at a goat and a pronghorn, they look super similar. Look at all the different kinds of sheep there are, you know, peccaries and how they match with pigs. Even mule deer, how crazy it looks like a mule. It's easy to think like that maybe those are correlations. But the point I really want to hit is that there is zero evidence for elephants in the New World, right? And that's not a deal breaker because we have Hannibal crossing the Alps, right? We have lots of stories of war elephants in the Old World, of which there is zero archaeological evidence for. Like we don't have any archaeological evidence of Hannibal's elephants in Spain or Italy. That doesn't mean it didn't happen. But I think like a really interesting thing is the fact when it talks about elephants, it mentions elephants with curlams and cumons, right? Which I think is pretty accepted because it's really logical that Joseph Smith or Mormon, whoever it was who left those words untranslated, wouldn't have done it unless the animals were extinct and extinct to a level that he didn't even know any modern analog to translate them to. Does that make sense? So then the fact that elephants are coupled with curlams and cumons, right? And these circumstances, so check this out. Okay, this is really kind of crazy cool. Listen to what it says about them, right? It says, it came to pass there began to be a great dearth upon the land. And these are only mentioned at the very beginning of the Jaredite record. And the inhabitants began to be destroyed exceedingly fast because of the dearth, for there was no rain upon the face of the earth. And it came to pass that the flocks began to feed toward the land southward, which was called by the Nephites Zarahemla. It came to pass that people did follow the course of the beasts and to devour the carcasses of them which fell by the way until they had devoured them all, right? And this is in reference to the elephants and curlams and cumons, which it says.
Can I just chime in on something that I'm seeing
Yeah.
right there?
Yeah.
It's saying that Zarahemla was in the land southward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If Heartlanders are saying that Zarahemla is in Nauvoo, that's north.
Yeah. Well, to
How do they
them,
explain that? I mean, this is just something I caught in the moment, but I don't want to spend a ton of time on that. But I'd love somebody that's a Heartlander post in the comments. This is saying that Zarahemla, known by the Nephites, was in the land southward.
Yeah, because their land northward is in either the Michigan Peninsula or Canada, right? And their land southward is all of like eastern U.S. So I mean, it makes sense in their model, but not in mine. I hope I can convince people that's like there's better explanations out there. But the main point that I want to make here, right, is that it says talks about all these animals, and it says all of which were useful for the food of man, right? Especially the elephants and curlams and cumons. And then it says that there was a huge dearth and they all fled and that they chased them and devoured them all. Well, that is exactly what science has now found as far as the extinction of the mammoths and the other megafauna, right? Right. So between mammoths, mastodons, and all these other megafauna that existed, that the earliest Paleo-Indians, they find all these massive kill sites, especially in my Jaredite heartland. There is a lot of evidence for these earliest inhabitants of North America who radiocarbon date to around 9,000 BC, 7,000 to 9,000 BC. Like they are living with mammoths. They're eating mammoths as well as other megafauna that are extinct now that we would have no name for, right? And then there's a dearth, the Younger Dryas. There's this major dearth to where modern archaeologists say the same thing that Joseph Smith says.
Wow.
Like Joseph Smith nailed it. Like, what are the chances
What
that
is
he just
dearth?
like,
What does dearth
I
mean?
never caught that. I've read the Book of Mormon over 100 times. I have never caught what you're bringing up right here, that there were animal names that we don't even know who or what they were, and so there was no translation because they were extinct.
yeah. And, you know, so I have never seen a single other author out there. Like, I'm confident that I'm the first to really connect the dearth and the Younger Dryas to the Book of Mormon, because everyone else is like, well, no, the Tower of Babel had to happen around 2000 BC. And so that, and since that doesn't fit timeline wise, and it's like, well, what? There's lots of explanations for why the timeline could be off, because the Book of Mormon Jaredite timeline is so vague. It doesn't give any dates.
Totally vague.
For all we know, Mosiah, right, who is translating the Jaredite record, he could have lacunas in there, which is really common even in the Bible, where we have huge periods of time that he just kind of leaves out, right, because they don't exist. So he kind of gives the first of the record and then it just jumps to another record. We could give explanations. If you're more of like a scriptural purist and you believe the scriptures more than science, you might say, well, maybe radiocarbon dates are wrong, right? Maybe they didn't actually die off at 7000 BC. Maybe it was more like 2000 BC, but there was some major catastrophe or change in solar flux, you know, that made it so that radiocarbon wasn't being produced at the same rates that it is today. Like, there's lots of explanations, whether you want to rely more on science or on the scriptures. But the fact is that this match is surprising. Like, it is like, bam, that's a crazy target that Joseph Smith's like, yeah, there were all these animals, including extinct ones, and that there was a dearth, which means a massive famine, right? And it didn't rain for some reason, a huge climatic event, and that then they ate all the animals, that the animals had to flee, and that they ate them all until they devoured them all. Like, bam, that is like full on exactly what the archaeologists say. Like, why not? Everyone should be drawing that parallel to be like, whoa, that's some cool stuff. If Joseph
And how could have Joseph Smith made this up? How could he have made it up in 1830? Like how could he have known that?
I don't think there is any mention of the Younger Dryas, or that there was some kind of a climatic event that is like making the mammoths extinct in a way where there would be no rain, you know? I mean, you could probably dig in and find something and be like, well, he's just, I've tried. I don't know. Other people can go ahead and try themselves. But I think that's like a pretty awesome insight of Joseph Smith's.
Totally.
Sounds like we weren't much different than the Jaredites, you know, extincting our own animals.
Hey, speaking of, does anybody want to eat like a curlum and cumum right now? Like, I'm like just getting hungry talking about it.
I like mine raw, like sushi style, personally.
Mine's got to be like a curlum.
I think I'll just stick with buffalo for now.
Okay. You're gonna do the buffalo burgers. You start the restaurant, Trevor. We'll push it for you.
Yeah.
Okay, come up with a catchy name while I'm talking here.
Curlums and cumums.
Yeah. I mean, the awesome part is they're so big, we're going to be able to make like up to 10,000 burgers per animal.
Yeah.
We're good.
Totally. That's probably why they liked them, honestly. That's probably they got so much meat out of them. Of course they would target them.
Yeah, I don't know why. Okay, so let's move on in my model. The second kind of main event that happens in the Jaredite thing is Omer, right? So Omer is like the king, and there's like this assassination plot against him. And so he takes off, and it says it goes all the way to Cumorah. And this is the reason why the two Cumorah theory exists in the Mesoamerican models, right? Because Omer, we know that they landed and they kind of have this Jaredite heartland. And then it says that he goes by the hill Shem, and he goes all the way to the hill of Cumorah and flees for his life. Okay. And so people in the Meso model, that they came up with two Cumorahs because they're thinking, well, there's no way that Omer, because their Jaredites are down in the Isthmus of Tehuantepec. Can you guys see my cursor right there? Isthmus of Tehuantepec, that's their Olmec are their Jaredites, right? And even though that the Jaredites, like, it works great for the Olmecs work great for the Jaredites, but there's all these other really impressive sites that also are at the exact same time, right? Like Watson Break and Poverty Point, the Capacha Fortune, El Opeño. Like there's a ton of sites now that all date to that like 1600 BC, a lot like the early Olmec. So then they have to kind of be like, well, those are completely, even the early Adena, those are completely outside of the Book of Mormon narrative. Like, no. These are all the Jaredites. They covered the entire continent, And Omer, he went all the way across the continent, just like so many other people have, just like all the early explorers who came, in America did. They traveled long distances, but like I said, they have in their mind that that's just too far. People back then didn't travel very much. They stayed put. So Omer, if he went past Cumorah, that must mean that Cumorah is really close to where the Jaredites were, which is their Olmec. Does that make sense? You
So
guys get their reasoning and
it's
get
it's got me wondering now that, like, when you look at was it the book of when you look at the Jaredites, some say that they were giants. And if they were giants, then it's possible that the barges were massive. And it reminds me of not King Noah, but Noah's Ark, and how people believe that Noah's Ark is over there in Turkey, and that there's a huge, rock formation and petrified wood in that location. Makes me wonder if we could find the Jaredite barges in some way.
I love it, David. Yeah, that is a tangent I am not even going to tackle.
That is hilarious.
I've
It,
looked
it makes
into
me
the
sound
Noah's Ark.
crazy.
You are crazy, and we all love it. Like, it's so awesome. You just like keep it up, man. That there's so many people in the audience who have those same ideas, and so you're like resonating with them. Like, yeah, throw it in there. That's awesome. I don't know. I'm not when I look at the Noah's Ark in Turkey by Mount Ararat, their Mount Ararat, I don't see it, but some people do. So, and it doesn't
Just
say
for
anything in the Book
everybody.
of Mormon. I don't even think it says that Brother Jared was arch of stature. If people can catch me on that in the comments, I'm pretty sure it's only Nephi who's said he's not large in stature. So I'm pretty sure the reason
Just
why they think the Jaredites were giants is just because there's a lot of early records from the Spanish that said the first inhabitants of the land were giants. And then they
got
end
it.
up finding a lot of skeletons where they say, well, these are pretty large, because even in the time of Joseph Smith, like, the average height was kind of short. They're like,
Well, I just want our viewers to know that I'm listening to you in the comments. Okay.
throw it into David. And if you agree with David, if you're like into that stuff, like, seriously, give us a comment, because we listen to all opinions here. Okay, so anyway, so hopefully you catch Omer, right? That's one thing you gotta think about. But the real point that I want to hit for both Heartlanders and Mesoamericanists is that I hope that you will study the archaeology of the other camp, right? Because if you're a Meso person and you're thinking that the Olmec down here in Tehuantepec are the Jaredites, well, then what do you think about like study the early Adena, right? Study like the early mid woodland culture. Study El Opeño. Like, there's so many sites outside of your Olmec that make, like, who were they then? Like, they're just outside of your model. Could that open your mind to the fact it's like, no, this is a continental culture, just like it says for both the Jaredites and the Nephites. And if you are a Heartlander, and so you believe that the early Adena are the Jaredites, go study the Olmec and ask yourself, who were they? Why doesn't the Book of Mormon talk about them? Is the Book of Mormon lying when it says that they covered the entire face of the land, from the sea north to the sea south, from the sea east to the sea west? Open your mind to the fact that maybe it could be bigger, right? And watch my previous videos where I really go through and hit some of the stuff. Okay, next we're going to jump over some of these things. Anyway, just like I said, there's some awesome stuff with the Kurlams and Cumans. I think that the elephants it talks about match amazingly well with.
Hey, what's that massive thing? Is that a taper there? What is that thing?
No, like, tapers are kind of related to them, but these things are what are they called? They've got it's like a Paraceratherum, if I
That
remember
is
right.
humongous. That's the
Yeah.
actual size?
Yeah, these are actual sizes. And there was lots of other, like little animals, but anyway, they had a number of other ones that even aren't on this illustration. This one shows them a little better, right? These
You'll
are all
have to
the
give me you have to give me your image sources so I could put them in the video. That's amazing.
Yeah, and hopefully people can see these, like, between the and a lot of people don't understand how different mammoths were from mastodons. Like, mastodons were like rooting creatures that, anyway, there's lots of cool stuff there that make great Kurlams and Kumans. I don't know what else would be a Kurlam and Kuman.
We
Right?
could
Why
be
would they?
all of those.
Yeah. Why would they put those other ones in there if it wasn't something that's extinct?
Trevor, did you say we could be eating all of those? Is that what you
Yeah.
said?
Yeah.
Trevor's got the restaurant already started in his mind here. Okay, so there's, even when I talk about the Omer's complex and how Omer, right, he's the king, and he runs all the way from their center up to Cumorah, and then he hides out there, right, for a couple of years until somebody comes and tells him that the coast is clear and he can come back. Well, there are archaeological sites right there by Camorra that match with the extinction of the Kurlams and Kumams and the elephants, right? The Bullbrook complex, like look into it. It's pretty awesome. It had some super sophisticated, very early, it's the earliest example of like textiles. In fact, they're in the main report, they talk about like these little bones that they believe were actually the earliest needles, the earliest needlework in America. So this is like 7,000 BC, and they're finding like this camp, a very sophisticated, high culture, you know, for the age. So that there is definitely archaeological precedence for like maybe if a king took his entire group and they went and they hid as far away as they absolutely could, you know, they'd be up against the edge of the glacier at that time even, right? Because the ice caps were just barely starting to shrink. And so they fled as far as they could for their lives and then stayed there for a number of years until they could finally come back, right? Anyway, just a completely different way of reading Mormon.
This Bullbrook is in Massachusetts. Is that right?
Yeah, you can see in that map down there. It's right there in the Horn, Massachusetts. So if we would have gone right by Camorra, you know, to get to it.
Yeah.
Let's see. We won't watch that right now.
Oh man.
Okay, so some other interesting things. This is pretty awesome.
That's David. That's David as a baby.
Dude, is that your picture, David? I see the resemblance a little bit.
Probably is. It looks like the shape of my head.
No, it's me. It's definitely me. No, this is kind of cool. Okay, so there's so much. Like I said, the Jaredites work pretty great with the Olmec, and so do the Adena. There's way more outside of that. And I'm going to just show you some examples where I think that there was actually transoceanic contact throughout the Jaredite period that isn't even talked about in the Book of Mormon. And this is one of those examples. Like this guy right here on the left, this is an Olmec motif, right? They have these like kind of like fat babies that are in their artwork. You see them a lot. And not only that, you see them up into the Campeche culture, into West Mexico, outside of the Olmec heartland. And this on the right here, this is actually an Egyptian motif, right? So it's kind of interesting that they're so similar that you kind of had this this motif of having kind of like this bald, kind of fat baby looking characters where it's a mixture of adult and baby characteristics, but you see it in both Egypt and among the Olmec, right? And so maybe you just dismiss that as coincidence, but I think it's like interestingly similar in the artwork. And I'll give you lots of other examples of very similar artwork that you see between the Old World and the New World that date all the way back to Olmec times. So here's some more examples. If you read about the shaft tomb culture, and here's a Wikipedia article right here, right? So just go to Wikipedia, read about the shaft tomb culture. They're kind of global, but like the two main examples that it gives is the West Mexico shaft tomb culture and the Mycenaean shaft tomb culture. And we know the Mycenaeans were amazing mariners, right? But interestingly enough, they have grave setups that are really, really similar. And then you start seeing really interesting similarities in their artwork, especially in their eyes, like between Greece and Mexico, right? They have this really interesting thing where they make the eyes like really like bubble bug eyes. Crazy similar. Like the similarities, I'm surprised that you don't have more mainstream archaeologists, and you kind of are now actually pointing out like, oh, that is strikingly similar. And even kind of the red on buff motifs, as well as like their combinations of animals with these vessels, right? Animal vessels. You see them in both the Mycenaean culture and in West Mexico, and they date to about the same age, which I think it's like, once again, you can just excuse or like dismiss away one thing after another of these similarities in the artwork, or you can actually start to open your mind to it and be like, whoa, there really are a lot of interesting similarities between the way they have their grave goods laid out, between their vessels, between the color. There's even a story in Babylon about how the Babylonians went to a faraway land and traded like red dogs in their pottery, right? And we see that in Mexico. Like there's a motif where there's tons of these Colima red dogs, and something just like that is talked about in the earliest Babylonian records, right? Here's some quotes of it. So this land is called Melaua, and Melaua is a special trade partner, a faraway trade partner with Sumer, which is Babylon, ancient Babylon. And they traded precious woods. It was mountainous, synonymous with ruler of the whole world, this trading partner that they went with. and it says that they traded these red dogs, and you actually see the same kind of red on buff animalistic pottery in Mesopotamia as you do in West Mexico. Like kind of really interesting, crazy similarities. It should pique your interest, even if people are going to dismiss it. I think it's crazy that because I'm going to show one thing after another, and what I show in this video is only going to be a teeny bit of what I have. I have so many similarities between Mesoamerica or the Americas and the Near East, and you just have to dismiss them all. Here's another one. Like if you haven't looked up Taiwan jade culture, Filipino jade culture, there's a Wikipedia article on Filipino jade culture. I'll show you in this right here. Let's see. So you can see right here, this Wikipedia article, Philippine jade culture. It talks about how they had this huge jade network of trade that went all the way from India to Taiwan into the Philippines and Indonesia, right? But they were really big into jade. If you've heard of the Jade Emperor of China, like they were getting a lot of that out of Taiwan and the Philippines, all the way back into the Bronze Age, right? And so they know that it was a pervasive trade commodity in that Bronze Age culture, and they know that they had very advanced maritime capabilities. But then look at this, in La Venta in Mesoamerica, right there in the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, we have these masks. Like, look how oriental those masks look.
Yeah, big time.
Like those look full on Chinese, right? And so it's
Yeah,
like,
one
well,
your cursor's on is like 100% Chinese.
yeah. And I've seen people try to dismiss this, being like they'll show a picture of some like one from the Mayan lands, down there, and they'll have like slightly slanted eyes a little bit. But it's like, well, now they're actually finding that there's like genetics from China and definitely from the Polynesians in these cultures. So like, why not instead open your mind to the fact that it's like, yeah, these Chinese, I mean, we know that they were trading from India to China, which is 5,000 miles all the way back into the early Bronze Age. Why not just like open your mind and be like, no, these guys were actually coming to America as early as
Yeah,
2000, 1500 BC.
that Mesoamerican mask looks like those lips definitely look Polynesian, but those eyes are Asian.
Yeah. And some of the great heads among the Olmecs, they look full on African. Right?
Yeah.
And so this is what I believe. I believe that we are crazy. Like the archaeologists have just had this strong bias to dismiss anything that has to do with pre-Columbian transoceanic travel because they want to make us awesome or something. I don't know. They want to think that the ancient Americans were dumb. I think that Tehuantepec was a Panama Canal in the ancient world. I think as early as the Great Pyramids of Egypt, right, which date to 2200 BC, that there was globalized trade and that they were using the Isthmus of Tehuantepec and the city of La Venta as a trade corridor to go all the way from China to the Near East, right? And I think Africa was actually taking part in that. I think the early Egyptian empire, actually, you see a lot of very sub-Saharan African traits in early Egypt. I think early Egypt was far more sub-Saharan African, right? Far more black. Later on, it was conquered by the northern, the Greeks and the people.
We basically we're basically just as connected then, back in these days, as we are now. The only thing we had an absence of was the internet.
Right. And satellites.
Exactly the same. Exactly the same.
Basically the same, other than that.
Minus the internet.
I'm going to go right with you there, though. No, but I totally agree. I think that you had these empires, like the empire, like the Egyptian empire that built the pyramids, that they were powerful, they were amazing, they were globalized, right? And they created these trade networks, and they lasted for just a little while, and then they'd collapse, right? The culture would collapse in whatever that heartland was. Egypt collapsed, and then the trade networks collapsed, and it took hundreds of years to reestablish them. And that happened at least 3 different times, maybe 4, I think, in history. And I've kind of like plotted these out, and you see it in the artwork, and it's like you're still just going to have all of these academics dismiss all this stuff, right? I mean, oh, that's just chance. Blah, blah, blah. But it's like, this is pretty convincing stuff, and I'm going to get into more.
I mean, the cool news is you've got a lot of this crypto archaeology that's popping up, and it's becoming pretty popular. You're getting some guys that are getting platform pretty mainstream. Joe Rogan's putting a bunch of people on, and they're talking about the exact same thing. They're being like, look at these structures here in Indonesia, in Mexico, and there's so many similarities. So I think this is starting to bubble up into mainstream.
Totally. And you got Graham Hancock and his whole team. And the more that I think the academics completely dismiss all of his stuff, even though some of them might be questionable, the more they dismiss all of it, the more they just destroy their own credibility. because some of it is so convincing.
Well, and I think academics today, people are starting to wake up, and they're not trusting academics. At least I'm not trusting academics like I used to trust them. I'm questioning everything. I don't care what PhD you got behind your name. I think that academics are getting exposed.
Yeah. And I mean, COVID was huge for that, because you had the entire academic community in one voice denouncing things that now have been completely proven false. And so there's like, wow, these guys are so subject to groupthink. It's a little frightening. Okay, check out this one. This is so cool. Okay, this is what I think is the strongest, even though I have dozens of other ones that I'm not even going to show in this one. I'll show in other videos. This is the strongest evidence of pre-Columbian transoceanic travel that there is, right? And I know I've never seen this used in the Mormon community ever. I've seen some of Graham Hancock's gang.
Oh, this is the purse.
Yeah. We'll start to see this. Like, as soon as I start to publish on this, I know that a bunch of other Mormons are going to just like jump on the bandwagon, which is sad, because then anyway, I think that like God, he just downloaded so much stuff into my brain. Like, there's so much stuff over 20 years that I've gotten, and I know I'm going to put it out in piecemeal, and other people are going to take it and use it to try and prove their pocket models, when in fact it all proves the continental model. But let's just go through this, because it's awesome. Okay, so just look on the left here. This is this massive car-sized boulder, right, relief near La Venta, right? So this is in the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, right, Mesoamerica. You've got this piece of artwork, and then you've got this artwork on the right. These are in Iraq, right, Mesopotamia. So check out, I'm going to go through a couple of these motifs. We've got like this dragon-looking snake in an interesting shape, right? And can you see that dude's helmet is a bird helmet? Can you see that? Like, he is wearing a bird mask. So what you're seeing in that relief is the same thing that you're seeing in this later statue, where he's got a bird mask on, right? And then not only that, he has a fish feet, which I'm not even going to show, but that is a Mesopotamian motif we see in a ton of artwork. And then he's holding a satchel. He's holding this little purse, right? And it's like, what the heck? That's weird. What's in the purse? Like, what is the religious ideology behind all of these motifs? But you look here in these reliefs from Nimrod, right? And you've got the exact same thing, right? This bird-headed anthropomorphic bird, right? A man bird holding a purse. Now, like, seriously, tell me, what are the chances that two civilizations that, according to modern thinking, have been separated for 7,000 years, 10,000 years practically, right? Evolved completely separately for 10,000 years with no contact. They both decided, hey, I'm going to draw a religious, I can like some relief here of a Birdman carrying a purse.
Yeah, zero.
It literally, like, I honestly think that you have to be an idiot. Like, it's unfortunate. I would never use, like, people could call me an idiot. Sure, go ahead. But in this particular case, to try and say that this is chance is bonkers, right? And it gets worse, because just watch. Okay, so in the next slide, it's not just the purse, it's not just the anthropomorphic head, but do you see the shape of this? It's basically like it's a dragon, it's a bird snake. So we've got kind of this bird-beaked snake, and it's forming almost like a cave, a special cave motif. And these are powerful motifs that show up in tons of artwork, right? So if you know about these things, you'd be like, oh yeah, that's like 10 other pieces of artwork, because that cave motif is all over in Mesoamerican and even Olmec art. So you've got those motifs. Now check out this relief in Egypt. Okay, this is what they call Happy's Cave. And Happy's Cave has this bird-headed snake forming a cave around this god dude, right? Isis. So once again, it's like we've got almost every single aspect of this piece of artwork in La Venta is either has a Mesopotamian or an Egyptian counterpart. And not only that, they date to the same time period of around 700 BC.
Wow.
So once again, what are the chances of that? Like, seriously, who can dismiss that and be like, oh yeah, that's just chance. I mean, the ancients just liked bird-headed snakes with satchels, with purses. They're cross-dressing.
I'm sorry. I'm reminded of my friend Brian, who knows Egyptian, and he's pointed out to me that there's still in the Book of Mormon strong Egyptian influence, like Nahor. is actually derived from Egypt or has some sort of Egyptian influence in their religion.
Yeah,
So this is
there's tons of
amazing.
stuff. I can go through so many other motifs where we pull in Egyptian mythology and their pantheon into Mesoamerican stuff. There's so many correlations. I'm not even going to get through half of them because I can see it's already like almost 10, and we gotta we'll cut this off and maybe pick it up another time. But anyway, I hope
Lance,
everyone will look at this.
Lance, look at this. This guy in the bottom right hand corner here. Is this? Do you say this is Isis here?
So it's happy.
Oh, happy.
Yeah.
Okay, happy. This guy's happy go lucky over here. And to me, this looks like my Oculus controllers. You know, like where I'm playing Oculus.
Oh, yeah.
That's definitely what it is. He's got his Google goggles on there, and
Yeah.
he's like playing Fortnite for sure.
Right. That's
There's aliens
crazy.
somehow involved in this. It really is crazy.
And the fact that the snake has this bird head is absolutely impossible to think that two different civilizations are like coming up with this. And then I think one other thing that a lot of people may not take into consideration is the length of time and energy and effort that it would take to carve something like this shows how important this message is conveying to their society. I mean, this is a labor of love, or this is something that they believe is so important. And I know that purse thing is important. I mean, the Sumerians, you're not even showing Sumerians. They've got the same purse guy carrying.
I'll talk about that another time because it fits into an entire religious motif. It's actually related to the date palm and the pollination of the date palm and the way that their priesthood cult, fit in the idea that you had to pollinate date palms by hand as a human if you wanted to produce the productivity of the harvest. And they were applying that then to their human priesthood, where the priest's job, just like a gardener, was to increase the productivity and population of the people that he ruled. Anyway, super interesting. I'll talk about that in another thing. I'm going to go through one other one, and then we'll kind of like wrap it up in a bunch of.
Oh, we got to put a Napoleon Dynamite slide on here, David, because we're going into griffins.
There we go.
He loves griffins.
Where's my tots, dude?
Yeah.
So yeah, this one on the right, Chalcanzingo. Oh, and I was just going to mention with that La Venta, on top of everything else we were saying, its location. Its location on the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, where it would serve as a Panama Canal to the ancients. Like once again, what are the chances?
Global trade.
Yeah, even its location screams. And it's in the same place where all of those Olmec masks, right? They have all this Asian characteristics. That's the exact same site. And there's dozens and dozens of those, right? So it's like, what are the chances? Like, open your eyes. Open your eyes. Like all this stuff, I know this stuff is going to become mainstream within the next 2 decades or so. And then everyone's going to be like, oh, Book of Mormon. Remember how we were saying for like 200 years how there was like zero evidence of transoceanic pre-Columbian travel? Whoops. Anyway, I just hope as it happens, like people, the continental model. Anyway, I'm not even getting into the North American stuff because there's a lot of really cool stuff in the Heartland too. Okay, but let me just talk about this on the right. Just as Chalcanzingo. This is my original Zarahemla. This is where I believe that the people of Zarahemla first came. They kind of settled La Venta and they're coming up. Anyway, God, there's so much to that. I know people are going to get confused because you've got San Lorenzo and La Venta, and you've got the Olmecs overlapping with these Assyrian trade partners who are the Mulekites. But check out how you've got this like anthropomorphized. He's like a cat, and in other things you actually see his tail. But he's like a bird-headed cat trampling on this captive, right, at Chalcanzingo. I've actually been to this ruin. It's a cool place. Now look how close that is to these Mesopotamian Horus griffins, where you've got a bird-headed cat trampling on a captive, right? And that's found in Iraq, right? Syria and Iraq. And how similar it is to the Egyptian motif, right, of the human-headed cat trampling on a captive. So I mean, I don't think there's anyone in their right mind who would see the Egyptian and the Mesopotamian motifs and not be like, oh yeah, well that's because there was cultural diffusion happening, right? These two cultures were in communication, and so that's where the similarities in their artwork comes by. Of course, this is part of the religious motifs. But then they're going to look at the ones in Mesoamerica and be like, oh yeah, that's just chance, right? They just evolved over 10,000 years with similar affinities to bird-headed cats. Like,
What do you mean by captive? Trampling a captive? What do you mean
So
by that?
that's part of the, if you look at the Egyptian motifs and translate like what's going on, it's like a symbol of the fact that they are holding down a captive. Like they're taking, it's a symbol of we conquered you, right?
Got it.
So
Well, it looks like the cat on the left from Iraq, the head is being directed to the right, while the Mesoamerican one, it's just being face down. So it just
totally
looks like
different.
there's more symbolism there too.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And do you see how Asiatic this guy looks as well as that guy? Very interesting. The
Yeah.
Egyptian one.
Interesting.
Yeah, and
Man,
you got,
just I've looked at these and I've never really paid any attention to the detail that you're looking at. I mean, now that I'm looking at it, I'm like, yeah, they're definitely walking on top of that person. There's a lot of symbolism in that for sure.
yeah. Yeah. So anyway, I know we all have to go. You know, I have so much more. I'm just going to kind of wrap this up as I give people more teasers of the continental model, right? And my belief. So we have not only, and I have a ton more. Like I said, there's a lot more. Both Assyrian, we've got cuneiform writing, both in the heartland and in South America, right? We've got all sorts of motifs in Izapa on the west coast of Mexico that match with Egyptian motifs that I'm going to show in ways that no one else has shown before. Really, really cool stuff. I believe very firmly that starting with the Assyrians, that the Assyrians reopened the Egyptian trade corridors. So that at the time of the Great Pyramids, right, you've got the Great Pyramids dating to 2200 BC, you've got Stonehenge dating to about 2200 BC, you've got the big pyramids in Indonesia dating to about 2200 BC, you've got Caral on the east coast of Peru, west coast of Peru, dating to about 2200 BC. So you have these major megalithic architecture, all dating to 2200 BC, which I think is evidence that that's when a huge trade corridor at the end of the Bronze Age opened up, and then it collapsed and it was reopened by the Assyrians somewhere between 1000 and 800 BC. You had another trade corridor open up. You know, certainly by 800 BC, you start seeing all these Assyrian artifacts and correlations in the New World, and I think that's the Mulekites. So I think that the Book of Mormon people, they kind of just lump everyone into the Mulekites, when in fact there was actually many different landings happening, right? And that some of them were Israeli and some of them were probably Assyrian or Phoenician. And I think a lot of them came through England. And the Kolbrin, right, the book I've talked about in some of my other videos I've done with you guys, totally talks about that. Talks about all these Mesopotamian, these Near Easterners from Crete, from Cyprus, from Phoenicia, the coast. They're all coming up into England, into the 10 mines. They start to settle around 1000 BC, kind of these high societies in England, and I think they're coming from there over to the Americas by 800 BC for sure, and they are coming first into the land northward, right? First into the land of Mulek, which is my land. It's in the northward. So all the Heartlanders, like they're all talking about the land of Mulek. Like that is totally Book of Mormon stuff, and I think we're gonna get more information on it in the future, right? From what's like come to me. And but it says from thence, like after going up to the land northward, from thence they came up into the South Wilderness. So they first went to North America, made some settlements, dropped some artifacts, and from there, then they started to settle down into South America, right? And found La Venta and even Chalcanzingo at some of these early cities and trade with the natives there. Anyway, really cool stuff. And in the next episodes, then I'll start to show all of my actual cities, right? I'll show my land of Nephi, which I talked about in my other video, my Zarahemla. We'll go into detail about my final battles, where I think I have evidence of every single final battle in the Book of Mormon, from Zarahemla to Cumorah, and tons of bodies. And there's 2 different timelines that I'll go over, just like I did with the mammoths and mastodons, where you can like either believe the radiogram dates or the Book of Mormon. But either way, there's evidence of like every culture, basically from Valley of Mexico to Cumorah, collapsing with dead bodies all over the place.
Can't wait.
Anyway, it's really cool stuff. Let's see. So yeah, 950.
Hey, are we gonna leave it there? Because and for everybody that's watching these series, I want you to understand, don't like hold everything, because what Lance is presenting is like a book. You don't read 3 chapters of the book and decide you know the book and you know the ending. You got to get through the whole book. We probably have another 6 or 7 videos that we still need to do. And so what I would ask you to do is take the information in, hold judgment, like pump the brakes just a little bit, and let us get through the entire book. And once we get through presenting all of the evidence from top to bottom, from front to back, from start to finish, then all of a sudden you can go ahead and start saying, what about this? What about this? What about this? Now, post in the comments if you have questions. Lance is active in the comments, especially on this. This is huge. Everybody's been fighting on two different models. And what we're trying to say is maybe you're both right. Maybe it's more unified. Maybe there's evidence in both camps, and that together we can actually prove that indeed and in fact, this is where the Book of Mormon took place. So pump the brakes a little bit. Lance, appreciate you coming on. We talked about a couple of different things. I'm excited. We really created 2 videos in one out of this. We'll be releasing these videos at least once a week, if not twice a week, so that we can get you the entire information. If you want to skip ahead because you're so interested, go to gatheredin.1 and you can find all of this on there. There's so much information there. Again, Lance, dude, you're like, I've seen it in the comments. People freaking love you, dude. They're like, Lance is my favorite guy you've had on. So they love you. And there's so much more to talk about with Lance. The continental model and the Book of Mormon geography is like one of like 50 things that we're going to be discussing with Lance. We're going to be talking about prophets that exist today in Israel, like really cool things. He's stoked to talk about Ben Catherine. I'm stoked to learn about Ben Catherine. So again, thank you all for tuning in. If you haven't already, subscribe and like. We just hit 3,000 and took us about a month and a half to hit 3,000 subscribers. So this train is moving. If you have other concepts or thoughts or topics that you think we should cover, post in the comments. We are happy to explore everything, both sides of the argument. And so we appreciate all the love, all the support. We're doing the best job we can. And if you see comments back from Zion Media, know that that's Trevor. Trevor is managing these comments like he is all over it. And so we're trying to make sure that we are responding to everything. And hey, show David Douglas some love. He is the one that is grinding away to pump out this content, to do the edits and get it out there. And so we're doing the best job we can. You're going to see us, I think, step up a little bit. I'm going to build out a studio. We're going to try to up our game even more. I'm having a ton of fun. Like for me, this allows me to just learn and explore new things. This is one of the coolest hobbies I have. I'd rather do this than play golf. And I love golf, but I'd rather learn from guys like Lance than go and play golf. But Trevor, David, any final thoughts as we wrap this thing up?
Nothing shall be withheld from them.
That's right. David, anything?
Good. I'm good.
David, you need to have a saying where you always just say, bring your tinfoil hat, guys.
Well, Lance, thank you so much again for coming on. It's been a pleasure and can't wait for part 4 for myself. I'm Shane Baldwin for David Douglas and Trevor Keys and our guest Lance Weaver. We'll see you next time.
Hey, yo, you. Go subscribe to Zion Media. Just click subscribe. It's the easiest thing. By the way, you're looking good. You're looking good.